All right, so today we're going to talk about 3 economic systems. I'm going to put these all side by side on the board so that you can kind of compare and contrast the 3. So we're going to start with this one over here. Capitalism, that's the first one that we'll talk about. Then we'll talk about socialism. And then communism. It's important to note that these 2 right here are related. Okay? Communism comes out of socialism. Okay? So I'll explain that a little bit later. I also want to explain this. This kind of economy and this kind of economy are complete and total polar opposites. Okay. Now, as we talk about capitalism, there's 5 characteristics of capitalism that we're going to talk about. 3, 4, and 5. In socialism, it's more like 3. Talk about 3 of those. And then when we talk about capitalism, I'm going to talk about how capitalism comes about. All right, because it's very similar to socialism with just some add-ons. Okay, first of all, in capitalism, first thing that you'll find in a capitalist society, something very, very important, is private property. How many of you have you live in a family where your parents own their own home? What? A few. How many of you have families where you own your own car? I would hope to see almost everybody there. I mean, I guess technically you could be leasing it, which is not technically ownership, but most people have at least one car. Okay, not everybody, but a lot of people do. Private property. That's what that's all about. You guys have seen those signs, you know, like in the woods or whatever. You'll see a sign up on a tree. It'll say private property, do not trespass, that sort of thing. We have the ability to own our own stuff, our own property within society. Okay. The second thing is the concept of free enterprise. Free enterprise. And that has nothing to do with Star Trek. Okay? I want you to think of it this way. If you have a great idea, let's say even right now, you guys potentially could have amazing ideas for something that you want to make or sell. You can start your own business. And as long as you do it legally, and you go through the proper channels and you get the right permits and things like that, and it's not illegal, you can do it. Anybody can start their own business. That's important to note. Small businesses in the United States of America make up the vast majority of businesses. Okay? Mom and pop stores and things like that all over the United States. Little companies that become sometimes bigger companies. That's all about free enterprise. Okay? The third characteristic I love, and it's very important, is competition. When you guys are out driving, trying to find something to eat, and you come upon a fast food restaurant, what do you notice is located right next to that fast food restaurant? Another fast food restaurant, and then one right across the street, another fast food restaurant. Sometimes 2 of the exact type of fast food restaurants, like you might have a Taco Bell and a Taco John's, like right there, right next to each other. Or you'll have a couple of burger joints, right? Burger King, McDonald's, right in the same area. Works the same way with car companies, right? You'll have a car dealership, and then a car dealership, and then a car dealership, and a car dealership over here. That's competition. That's what it's all about. And it benefits you as the consumer because you know where to go to find, wouldn't it suck to have to like you're driving and you go to one restaurant and the people in your car are like, oh, that doesn't sound very good. So you got to drive 4 more blocks? No, that would stink, right? You want to be able to find what you need right then and there, and competition creates that kind of situation. But it also works good for the businesses too, because the customers know where to find them, right? They go by one car dealership and they see cars, but then they see, oh, that car dealership down the way is having a sale. So it all works together. Competition is a good thing for the businesses and for the consumers. The fourth one. Sorry, squeaky marker. It's the concept of freedom of choice. You get to decide what you buy and what you don't buy. And when you make those choices, that impacts businesses, because if you're not buying their stuff, they got to change something, don't they? If you feel like their stuff is too expensive, you don't buy it. You go buy something else. Okay? So you have the freedom of choice when it comes to being a consumer. And then, like I said, you have the freedom of choice when it comes to starting a business. You have a great idea, you want to try to get it going, you can go ahead and do that. Freedom of choice. And then finally, this is kind of what drives businesses. Possibility of making profits. Does anybody know what profit is? I'm not sure I'd call it wasted, but I know exactly what you're saying. So let's say that you're a business. In order for you to run your business, you have to pay your employees, right? You have to pay all your employees. You got to pay for the location of your business. Like if you're renting, you have to pay your electricity bill and all that, all your utilities. You have to pay for your products and the way that you made the products or whatever it is. All of that stuff has to be paid for first from the money that you're getting from consumers. And then if you have anything left over, then that's profit. Yeah. And the good part about this is if you're the owner of the business, you determine what happens to these profits. You could reinvest your profits into the business, like you could expand. If you're doing really, really well, maybe you open up another store. Or you keep the profits for yourself. You can do that too, as the owner of a business. That drives people to want to start businesses. It's profits. You don't want to be in a situation where you're not making any extra money. Okay, so this is capitalism. Pretty important stuff. There is a guy. I'm going to write his name like this, who wrote about the concept of capitalism. And he had a special belief. He believed that capitalism would work the best if the government butt out and didn't get involved in the economy. And there was a special term for that. It's a French term called laissez-faire. Okay? That basically means government hands off. He believed that in that kind of a situation where the government didn't get involved in the economy would grow and get better and better and better. Now, there's just one problem with that. He didn't really believe that greed would be a problem. But how many of you understand the concept of greed? When you have the possibility for profits, greed comes into play. Because when you got a little bit of money, you want more. And you want more, and you want more, and you want more. As a business owner, if you're greedy, you start to cut corners because you're trying to make more and more money, and you start making your products as cheap as they can be. And sometimes you create a product that's dangerous, or you make a product that actually hurts people. Okay? That's bad. And that actually happens. So there's another type of a situation where one organization tries to keep that from happening. That's where the government gets involved. And that's called a mixed market. It's free enterprise, but the government has to regulate a little bit. They have to make sure that the consumers are safe, and even the workers are safe. Because if your business owner is being greedy, sometimes they take shortcuts. They don't provide the necessary equipment to keep the workers safe too. So think about cars for a minute. Back in my day when I was growing up, in cars, some of the cars didn't have seat belts at all. And those that did, well, they didn't have a requirement that you wear them. And they had no airbags, because back in the day, those things didn't exist yet. But as the technology was developed for different things, the government came in and they mandated that certain things be done in cars to make them safer for people. Okay? Without the government, chances are those things would never have happened. But now cars, when you think about cars, one of their big selling points is safety measures. What kinds of safety things do they have on them to make them safe for adults and kids and all that sort of thing? So the government gets involved. When the government gets involved, it's called a mixed market economy. And that is what we have in the United States of America. The government does regulate and control some things to make sure that there's protections for everybody. Okay? So that's capitalism, and the dude who wrote about capitalism was Adam Smith. Let's look next at socialism. All right. Socialism is where the government owns the means. I'm going to erase this here real quick. The means of production. Secondarily, society, through the government, decides what gets made. So instead of private individuals deciding what gets made and how it gets made and who it gets made for, the government's the one making those decisions. And instead of private property, you have public property. Basically, society owns everything. Natural resources owned by the society, thus the government. Okay. So, how many of you have ever seen the old reruns of a show called The Beverly Hillbillies? Anybody ever seen that? You've seen it? It's about this family from Arkansas who moves to Beverly Hills, and they buy this place. They're actually, no, on their property in Arkansas, they're out hunting for like squirrel or something, and they shoot the ground, and oil comes up to the ground, and they become rich. Okay, then they move to Beverly Hills because they're rich. They buy this mansion or whatever. And it's the story about these rednecks living out there in California. Okay, but on their land they discovered oil. Okay, in America, if you discover oil on your land or under your land, technically, who owns it? You do. If you own the land that you found it on. Okay, it was on your private property, underneath your private property. You have the right to exploit that and get that oil out of there and get the profits from it. Okay. In socialism, if you found oil, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the government, the society, because the government is the wing of society that makes it all happen. Okay, so it's public property. In socialistic countries, a lot of times the main type of housing that you will find is like big, huge, multi-story apartment buildings all over the place, row and block after block of apartment buildings. Now we have apartment buildings, don't get me wrong, but we also have housing all over the place as well. Okay. Let me see. Now, some countries are not completely socialistic. Just different parts of what they do is socialistic. So I want to mention this. There are some countries that have like certain aspects of their country which are socialistic. Usually they're democratic countries, but they've wanted to add a little bit of a socialistic feel to certain things that they do, like healthcare. Like if you go to Canada and you live in Canada, you are guaranteed healthcare in that country. It's called socialized medicine. The government basically pays for healthcare. And so everybody has it, no matter how rich or how poor you are. So with democratic socialism, it's usually like one area of society is socialized, and then other things are not. Okay? People's rights are protected. Everything is the way that it should be. Okay? Socialism, let me think if there's anything else I want to mention about socialism. By the way, this would be like examples of like countries like Norway, like I said, Canada, where they're basically a democracy, but they've socialized certain things. All right, now, as I mentioned before, communism comes out of socialism. It really is, I like to think of it as socialism on steroids. Okay. Socialism on steroids. And what I mean by that is this. All of these things still apply. Government controls every aspect of your life. They own all property and everything that's inside that country, and they rule by military control. So you can think of it almost like a police state. Okay. So there's a guy who wrote about this concept of communism. His name was Karl Marx. He wrote a book called The Communist Manifesto. Basically what he said is that communism was inevitable. He's like, think of communism as Thanos, okay? It's inevitable. Anybody here like superhero fans who saw the Avengers movies? He said that communism was inevitable. What he said was, in capitalism, what generally is always going to happen is that there's going to be people who get richer and richer and richer. And then some people are just going to remain poor, the working class, are going to remain poor. And eventually what would happen is that the rich business owners would take advantage of the workers so much that the workers would eventually revolt. And it would be a violent revolt. Like people would get killed. And what would spring out of that would be, instead of just socialism, where everybody's supposed to be like equal, like everybody has equal opportunity. I didn't write this down, so I need to say this is number 4. Equal wealth and opportunity. Should have said that, sorry. In socialism, the idea is that wealth is kind of distributed amongst everybody. And so wealth would be equalized, and so would opportunity within the country. Karl Marx said that it would go further this direction. Okay. The government would end up controlling everything. And so it actually has happened that way in certain places. There's not many just straight socialistic countries. Most of them end up being communistic countries, which is kind of a sad reality. Let me give you an example. Communist China. I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys last time. They recently have decided that young people are wasting their time. That they're spending too much time listening to music, playing video games, and uploading videos to TikTok and other social media websites. And they don't believe that's the best use of time for young people. So they are changing the rules and basically saying that young people get 3 hours of screen time per week. Does that sound fun to you guys? Well, you might be thinking, well, how are they even going to be able to do that? Right? Because we live in America, right? How would they even manage to make that happen? We have freedom, right? We get to do what we want to do. Our parents can ground us, but the government can't do anything to us when we're uploading videos to TikTok. There's But in China, the government controls everything. So social media websites in China are run, or at least controlled closely by the Communist Party government. TikTok is a social media app. It's actually run by a Chinese company. Here in America, TikTok looks different than TikTok in China. They censor content in China. If they want to shut down TikTok in China, all they have to do is say we're shutting it down, and they close the whole company down. Okay. So as far as 3 hours of screen time goes, probably what they would do is everybody would have like their own, I know for a fact that they use the cell phone as a way of tracking people and that sort of thing. So what they would do is probably have some kind of login that you would use, kind of like Clever. That's probably how they do this. They would have a login for all of your important apps and stuff like that. And they would keep track of how much time you're using them under your login. And then when 3 hours is up, it would shut down until the next week or whatever the case may be. They also decided that they didn't like other things, like they didn't like certain types of music or the stars behind music in movies. This one particular Chinese movie star, they found they didn't like something that she was doing or something that she represented. And so within like 3 weeks, they had taken down every reference to this woman on all social media in China. It's like she disappeared because they didn't like what she stood for. They just got rid of her. In a communist system, the government can do that sort of thing because they control everything, every aspect of life. In China, they have a system where they can go ahead and they basically have like this point system, kind of like credit in the United States, but it's basically a point system about being a good person. They determine what being a good person is. And if you so you can gain points or you can lose points based upon things that you do. So let's say that you start running up debt. That counts against you. Okay. Let's say that you get traffic tickets. That counts against you. Let's say that you look at inappropriate things on the internet. That counts against you. So it all goes into this like credit system. And if you have a bad score, like if you're not a good person, you lose privileges and rights within their society. It's pretty crazy, but they can do that sort of thing in a communist system. We couldn't do that here in America, could we? Because our system is based upon like freedoms. See, free. Okay. So that's one of the big differences in how it shows itself up in communism. This is specifically called a command economy. And it's what it sounds like. The government commands that certain things get done and they get done. If the government doesn't want it, it doesn't get done. Now, China does not have a pure communistic economy, but their society is communistic for sure. Like they have a lot of big businesses in China. But those businesses exist because the government allows them to exist. And if they get out of hand, or they do something the government doesn't want them to do, the government can just shut them down. So they have to play this like balancing act between building a huge company that is very much like a company we have in our capitalist system, and then abiding by what the communist government wants them to do. So it's a balancing act over there, for sure.